Get in on the action and make your bet with Sports Interaction. Summer is heating up with baseball. Can the Jays make a run at the division?
Oh, no.
Yeah. Hey, but you can bet before the game, whichever way you think. Live and in play and all your favorite teams and hot dog contests. Woo! Woo! SportsInteraction.com/SDPN or download the app to get started. It's 19 plus. And what do you have to do, Steve?
Please play responsibly.
Welcome to Nailing the Apex, everyone. Please head on over to Spotify. Give us a 5-star rating and a follow. Same goes with Apple Podcasts as well. You can also watch us on YouTube. You can follow me on social media at Tim Hauraney. Joining me today for the emergency pod, Jesse Blake, Adam Wylde. Guys, what's going on?
Woo.
Oh, it's a big day, Tim.
Yeah,
Big
Adam.
day.
Adam, before you got here, Tim was saying he wanted to sleep, and then AlphaTauri and Daniel Ricciardo decide they're going to wake him up today. So no sleep for Tim.
No, Tim, why were you up so late? What are you partying or something? What's the deal?
Dude, I just flew back from the UK.
Yeah, I don't have any excuses. No excuses. AlphaTauri waits for nobody. Slowest car on the grid, but it's the driver's fault.
Yeah, apparently. It was interesting. I was sitting down with Nyck de Vries on Thursday, and it didn't honestly, it kind of sounded like they were going to give him a bit of a reprieve in terms of how long the leash was going to be let out. And, it really sounded like, summer break was a bit of the cutoff for him. But I think what happened on Tuesday, because Daniel Ricciardo had his Pirelli tire test, I think that's what really moved the needle in terms of getting him back into the car and back into the fold. Now he is on loan from Red Bull Racing, but he's still in the family. He's still, et cetera. They can move him along. But guys, I was a little bit shocked by this one. Were you? I mean, like a lot of people were. Like most of the people who cover Formula One didn't see this coming.
I think the thing that got me was that, he had been, people had written him off at McLaren. B, he came back as sort of like a marketing guy. Like, that's how they phrased it. Like, he's going to take a year off and have his time. And he was adamant that he didn't want to drive. Like, he could have been driving for Haas this year, easily. I believe they had a seat for him. But, I think there was, which surprised me, I think the most is that how quickly this happens. Like, you would think, I know that Red Bull does switch drivers mid-season, but Nyck de Vries got objectively the worst car on the grid, and he got 10 races to try and see. And I'm trying to figure out what his bar for success would have been, because from what I'm reading, it was because, they're concerned about Sergio, which didn't help him. And then, Yuki's had some good races despite the bad car. And that their sim times on laps and that sort of thing are just not similar enough. I don't know what the thing for me, Tim, that was the most perplexing about this is not Daniel coming back. It's what did Nyck de Vries do that was that bad? Was he that bad?
Yeah, it just wasn't good. It wasn't working out well for him at all. I mean, throughout the whole weekend at the British Grand Prix, I mean, they introduced a fairly significant upgrade to the car. I mean, that car got a full upgrade, and there were points within free practice qualifying where Nyck was still 5, 6, 7 tenths off of Yuki, and I think they were expecting a little more from Nyck after the upgrades got introduced, and I don't think they were getting it. I don't think they were getting it from him, and I just think it was just a bit of a struggle the entire weekend, and it's tough because I really think that as a driver, and especially in this new formula, they need to be given more time. Like, it's really difficult, these new regulations, and I really think that the drivers should, like Yuki has, right? He's in his third year, and he really looks like he's starting to come into his own. And I think that should be the same for a lot of the drivers. But granted, Jesse, I mean, de Vries did come in with quite a bit of experience.
Yeah, well, like, Adam, you mentioned the speed at which this happened, and like that's what really stands out to me, because I want to ask AlphaTauri, what happened between the winter and what you thought of Nyck de Vries and signing him to now? Because that doesn't seem like enough time of an evaluation period. Because we understand like he's been considerably worse than Yuki, but it's really only half a season. I thought maybe at the end of the year you move to Daniel Ricciardo, you bring him back. So I wonder about the Sergio piece. We mentioned that as well, because I saw a couple of rumors going out there that bringing in Daniel Ricciardo is a little bit of a push to Sergio Perez to say that, hey, we got somebody in waiting now who's on the grid. But I feel for Nyck de Vries because I wonder if he's going to look back on this time and say, hey, I didn't really get a fair shake at this.
I agree, only because, like I was saying with the regulation, I mean, it's really challenging to ask these drivers to be fast right away, to really understand the tire, to really understand what the car needs. But I think also on the other side of that, I think like Daniel Ricciardo, this is, I mean, I think they wanted him in that seat for a while. And I know talking to him in Miami, and he had mentioned to me that, this tire test that he was doing today on Tuesday, that was going to give the team a better understanding of where he's at in terms of his pace and his performance. Because when they brought him into Red Bull, I think, Christian Horner's idea was to try and get the old Daniel Ricciardo back. And I think Daniel lost himself along the way, and especially at McLaren, in terms of his driving style, what he needs to do, because that really reflected a lot on what the Red Bull cars had been able to do, is how Daniel was able to drive those cars, because they were a little geared more towards his style and what he does. And I think, going into the simulator, performing really well there. And from what I'm told at this test that he did today, he was immediately quick right away. He was setting times that would have put him on the front row for this past weekend's British Grand Prix.
Wow. So is there a cascade effect here? Like we've looked at Sergio Perez not being able to get out of Q1, probably 3 of the last 5 races. He's not even gotten into Q3, I don't think, in the last 5 races. And not that it's going to cost Red Bull this year, because Max Verstappen is F1 Jesus at the moment.
He would be leading the constructors on his own.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. That's just so crazy, right? But in a future year when teams like, I would think, Mercedes, you can never count out. Ferrari's not going to be on the back burner forever, and we've got McLaren in a resurgence and Aston Martin kind of new on the scene. I would expect next year to probably be more competitive.
Yeah.
Are they concerned that Sergio Perez is maybe not the guy for next season?
Yeah, I think so. I think this is basically them having a look at, what can Daniel do, considering that this is a really difficult car to drive. I mean, because this could potentially be it for Daniel Ricciardo. Mm-hmm. Right, if he doesn't really perform well here, that could be the end of it for him. I don't really see Red Bull taking a chance on him if he's not performing well in the AlphaTauri. Considering, though, the AlphaTauri is probably the most difficult car to throw yourself back into Formula One into. Mm-hmm. It's a very tall mountain for him to climb. There is no doubt about that. But I think that also, like you guys had said, puts pressure on Sergio Perez, because now it's like if Perez consistently underperforms for the remainder of the season, I got a feeling he's going to be replaced, Jesse, by Daniel Ricciardo.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say that we're really happy for Daniel Ricciardo because he's such a great ambassador for F1. His role right now is global ambassador, like how Drake was the global ambassador for the Raptors. He's such a ball of fun at every moment he's on screen, on camera at an F1 race, and he's going to be great for Drive to Survive again. And just having him at the track every week as a reserve driver was fantastic to see, and having back in a seat is great for the sport itself. Mm-hmm. But you feel that Red Bull's using him right now to put pressure on their main driver, and you feel for Nyck de Vries. So there's all this other stuff that he's involved with, but just having Daniel Ricciardo back is so good for the entire sport of F1.
It was funny when I was in on the the presser with Nyck, because you literally sit down with him, like you're right beside him, kind of thing, chatting with him, and like the Netflix crew was like, I believe that if I remember correctly, they were kind of like around, like they had the big boom pole and it was going in. Now I don't know if that was AlphaTauri's social media team. I don't think it was, because they don't normally tape those sit down press interviews. Usually that is Netflix, but yeah, I mean, I guess now that I look back on it right now, it's kind of like, oh, okay, well, yeah, this may have been a lot closer than I think a lot of people thought. Because it was funny, because I was like literally walking through the paddock on, I think it was like Saturday or Sunday, and a buddy of mine who's a journalist came up. He's like, oh, I got this really big story and I'm working on and da-da-da. And I'm like, oh, sick. I'm like, I'm like, what do you think? Like, Ricciardo to AlphaTauri? And he's like, oh no, I don't think it's that at all whatsoever, because like, it's like nobody sees that. No one saw that happening. So yeah, just interesting. Jesse just kind of took everybody by surprise.
So I got a question for you guys. The Pirelli tire test was to happen today. I was excited to see what the results of that were for Red Bull. And I think Mick Schumacher was also racing as well, I think for Mercedes. But my question was, they are now saying that test this morning pushed this across the line.
Yes.
Do we actually believe that?
Yes.
So Daniel would have known, stepping into the car this morning, that if he raced well, he would have a seat.
That's a great question. I don't know what his mindset would have been jumping into the car. I remember, like, because I've spoken to Daniel quite a bit this season, like on camera, off camera, all that kind of stuff. And I always got the sense that it was, if I do well at this tire test, then I have a shot at coming back into Formula One, but I'm not sure if I want it to be under AlphaTauri. That was my sort of sense of all this, where maybe it's the Red Bull umbrella, the Red Bull family saying like, hey, let's put you here. Let's see what you do. And then if you perform well, then we'll move you to the big team again. We'll bring you back.
Do you think that's what would have convinced them?
I definitely think that this tire test, though, was extremely important for them to get a gauge on where he's at, because you got to remember, he's not necessarily, like, he's not out on the track driving current Formula One cars, right? All he is doing is he's in a simulator, and that simulator information and data is getting compared to Max and Sergio's, and they are trying to get Daniel back up to speed again. They're trying to get his confidence back, helping him get back to the Ricciardo of old, in quotation marks. And I think that was important for them to get him as ready as he could be, so they could evaluate him in the RB19, which is what they did today. So, yeah, I definitely think that, Adam.
What's the advantage of doing this now as opposed to at the summer break? Because usually if you're going to make a huge move like this, you do it when you have like 4 weeks of space, you get everybody acclimatized. Yeah. The news is kind of dying down. Then you pop up and do this. But right now you're doing this, and next week we got a race and he's got to hop in the car.
Yep.
What's the reason for the quickness of this decision?
Yeah, I think it's to try and just get him comfortable, get the confidence back. And the thing is, with being out of the race car for a few weeks, it tends to take a bit of time. Well, not like a ton of time, but it does tend to take a bit for you to get your confidence and get back up to speed. And now with Ricciardo, what I believe is trying to build him up again. And the more seat time they can give him to get him back to where he was, especially in a Formula One car, in race conditions, actually out on the track, because the simulator is still different from actual racing. That's the most important thing. And I think that's why they decided to just do this really quickly.
So you build this confidence, so at the end of the year, you can buy out Sergio and put him in the Red Bull car.
Yeah, I mean, potentially, right? Like, I don't know the ins and the outs of Sergio's contract. Nobody does. But I believe it does go till the end of 2024. So there would have to be some sort of clause, like a performance clause, maybe within the contract itself, that states if he's not within a certain bar of max, then they have to consider maybe letting him go. I'm not sure. I mean, the thing with driver contracts, guys, is like they're very convoluted and they are very complex. And so you never can say, it's because of this, it's because of that. It has this, it has that in it. But I mean, all you can do is really assume at the end of the day. No one really knows. But I think the writing is on the wall for Sergio, where it's like, start performing, or else we'll have to figure this out.
Is there a scenario where, and there have been we know that AlphaTauri is going to be rebranded. I personally hope it goes back to Toro Rosso, but it's not going to. It should have stayed Toro Rosso, in my opinion. It was, it's the Red Bull second team. It should have been. It should still be. But they're going to rebrand it again. And the idea is, because I think Red Bull looked at selling the team, and then they thought, you know what, we're better to hold on to it. Probably because the sport's going to make a pile of money, just in enterprise value over the next 10 years. But if they're going to rebrand it, bring it closer to the Red Bull brand, is what we keep hearing, right? Even if let's say Sergio has an unbelievable last 12 races of the year, right? Or is it 13 races we have left? I don't even remember. Let's say his last few races were like his first 5 to 7, which were awesome races. He did great. Is there any value to having a guy like Daniel Ricciardo there at the AlphaTauri team, looking more competitive? Because at the end of the day, Red Bull does have the best car on the grid. There's no reason why that AlphaTauri or whatever their successor is can't catch that. They do have the ability to share resources. I'm not sure how much Adrian Newey time that AlphaTauri gets, but can't they just copy it? And so my thinking is, okay, so if you're Red Bull and this is a whole big branding exercise for you, whether or not Daniel Ricciardo is in the B spot with the A team or the A spot with the B team, doesn't matter. He's there. And you can keep Sergio if he performs. And when that rebrand happens, you have a very noticeable, probably the most recognized face in Formula One outside of Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen as your A driver, or A minus driver, because Yuki is supposed to be the A driver.
I think one of the things is making this more of a B team, in all honesty. And I think with that comes the utilization of a lot of Red Bull's current components for the RB19. Now, you can't directly copy another car. You can be given components and parts and things of that nature. But I think next season's rebranded AlphaTauri team, their car is probably going to, get closer to what the RB19 is. And I think if you're Daniel Ricciardo, and let's say like Sergio performs really well from here on out, and they decide that they're going to keep him. Then if Daniel Ricciardo is performing really well, then you lock him into that AlphaTauri seat with potentially Yuki Tsunoda. And you now have a car that's probably going to be a lot more competitive than this season's car is. I mean, even if you take the RB19 and you throw it into next season, it's still going to be a top line car.
No question.
It's still going to be really good. Yeah. And I think if Daniel, if he's already performing well in the RB19 like he did on Tuesday, then I mean, next season would be a good season for him theoretically, if he's able to find his form again and come back and be competitive.
There's also the rumors about Yuki Tsunoda with Aston Martin, right? Because Honda is leaving Red Bull after next season and going to be the Aston supplier, and Honda's a big sponsor of Yuki, and Yuki's a big fan of Honda, and there's the Japanese kind of national connection there. Is that something?
I don't think so. Not right yet. Not until we get closer to 2026, right? Because then Honda's going to start moving a lot more of their production resources over to Aston Martin, and potentially Aston Martin's factory in a way, depending on what they can build on their site. I think that for Yuki, it's just keep performing, keep performing, keep being competitive, because you don't know, you could make that switch to Aston Martin for 2026, right? That could be a possibility. So I think for Yuki, it's just, he's going to have to hold on here and keep doing well.
Tim, do you have any insight on what's next for Nyck de Vries? Is this his F1 career? Is it done? Like, where does he go from here? Back to F2?
No, because he won the championship in Formula 2, so he can't go back. But
Right.
I mean, he could take a move into IndyCar. There are some IndyCar teams that do like him, that have shown some interest in trying to, get him for a test or get him. So I think IndyCar could be an option for Nyck, but I highly doubt it would be for this season. It would probably be more something for next year if he's able to work out some sort of a deal that requires not having to bring any funding or sponsorship, because some of the IndyCar teams that are at the back still need a driver to bring some funding to the team. But then also Formula E could be back on the table too, right? I mean, he did win a championship there. He was very competitive there. I mean, Toto Wolff really liked him, even though, Toto Wolff doesn't really have too many more connections left in Formula E since, Mercedes is done there. But yeah, I think his options could be pretty big. The thing is, once you get to F1, right, it's kind of like the top of the top. And you're not really going to, where else is there to go, right? Like, you can't go any higher, but, you can do transitional moves and you can go to WEC, right? There are teams that would definitely take interest in a driver like Nyck de Vries because he's won championships before. He is a champion. Like, we can't sit here and say just because he had to try and come to grips with a difficult AlphaTauri car to drive and then he was let go. You can't say that he's not good. Like, he is good. He just is. So I think there are options like that available for him. But I mean, it is really tough to see, right? But
yeah,
feel
for the guy.
Yeah, I feel bad for the guy, right? Like, it's tough. Adam, you had a question about McLaren, like in our text?
I do, but I got one more question about AlphaTauri because here's the thing. They're also moving on from Franz Soest at the end of the year, right? Do you have any insight into who might take over there?
Yeah, they're trying to get Laurent Mekies from Ferrari over to the team. There has been a press release that was issued by AlphaTauri a while ago stating that, Laurent was going to be the team principal. However, he is still doing work for Ferrari. I did see him in the paddock wearing Ferrari gear on the weekend. So he is still a part of Ferrari. So I don't know if there's anything going on with the buyout of his contract or how that negotiation works. But it is, believed that he will be the team principal for whatever the unnamed Red Bull second team is going to be. Right?
I wondered if it was that or if it was like a name like Mattia Binotto, who I think they call it a gardening contract in Europe, but he's playing out his deal at home. Is that a name that re-enters Formula One circles?
I haven't heard that yet. I keep hearing Laurent's name being associated with that. I think losing, well, I shouldn't say losing. I mean, I think not having Franz at the team is going to be a tough transition because there's, whoever comes in, whoever that's going to be, they're going to want to restructure internally, right? And there's going to be a lot of moving parts that's going to happen there, and that sometimes affects the race car. So it could be difficult for AlphaTauri, or it could be a smooth transition.
Okay. All right. And my question about McLaren is, because this is for my grid rival pool. All right. Am I investing in these guys? Because here's the thing: you can get Lando and you can get Oscar and you can get the McLaren team at a pretty good price right now if they're going to be good. But if they're going to be the way they were at the start of the year, they're way overpriced and it's not worth the buy. So I'm trying to figure out. And I know that was like high-speed corner Palooza at Silverstone. I know Hungary is a much more windy track, which is going to lend itself to more agile teams. I mean, Red Bull can do pretty much anything this year. But I would think Mercedes will probably be a little bit higher up on the grid. Maybe Ferrari as well. Their upgrades have seemed to work out well, although Charles just looks dejected at this point. Are McLaren kind of like Williams, and they're really good on straightaway speed and not great on the corners? Or are they for real? Are they back? Are they gonna, are they gonna challenge here? Like, am I in for a good back? I just need to know, because they were finishing like 18th and 19th before.
Okay, this is what I can tell you, and this is straight from the team.
Okay.
So this is from like Andres Stella and Lando Norris. Okay, so the car was good at the British Grand Prix for a number of factors. The upgrades, yes, the car is good in high speed corners like they are at Silverstone. You don't get a ton of those throughout the season though. And it's good with certain temperatures. It was cooler during the British Grand Prix. Like I had my jacket on and stuff like that. And they feel that, Hungary could be a bit of a challenge. If there's a race involved that has really high track ambient temperature, that could be a problem because of how the car uses the tire. I believe Lando had said something, and I'm paraphrasing here, but like the car was only 30% better type thing, where they still have a ways to go. I think there's, with other teams as well, like we're starting to see, there's going to be flashes where McLaren's going to be really good, and then there's going to be setbacks where they're going to struggle, like Aston Martin. We're starting to see Aston Martin as we go to other tracks. Aston Martin's really competitive, or they're not that competitive.
Okay.
Same with Ferrari. Like Austria was great for Ferrari. Canada was a good race for Ferrari as well. Those types of tracks for them really suit their car. So, they're going to be battling. They're going to be up towards the front. Same with Mercedes. I would say, looking at all of this, is that I would say since Mercedes did their upgrade, they've honestly looked the most consistent.
Okay.
Like they kind of really understand how the car and the tire works, because it's not necessarily a qualifying thing. It's more of a race thing where a lot of these teams, we'll use Haas as an example. I always use them as an example because they're like the biggest ones that drops off the fastest, is that qualifying pace is really great. Get in the race and the tire just goes away, and so does the car, and the balance is gone. And so like it's a really fine details that these teams are trying to search to figure out how to make sure that the car is fast in qualifying, but is able to handle the tire within the race. And that's sort of where like Red Bull has figured all that out.
Okay.
If you took Red Bull out of this season, it's truly one of the most interesting seasons we've had in a long
crazy.
time.
100%.
The midfield, everybody's so close, and race to race, you never know which car is going to work.
Yes.
And it's been fabulous from 2 down. It's been great to watch.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. It's, I mean, it's like Fernando said I think it was Miami. He had said it where it's like, it's like you said, Jesse, you remove Red Bull from the front row, and it's like this, we're talking about a legendary season, probably like one of the best Formula One seasons ever.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you this, Tim. In Hungary, week and a half time, which I can't believe is going to be July 23rd in a week and a half. Crazy. We obviously know Red Bull's going to do great unless there's a crash or somebody's sick, right? That's just so what teams do you believe will stand out in Hungary?
I think Aston Martin's going to be pretty competitive in Hungary. I mean, Red Bull will obviously be there, and I also think Mercedes is going to be pretty competitive there too. I kind of look at Ferrari from the standpoint of when they've got the car figured out, it's really fast. Like, Leclerc was Leclerc was pretty handy at a track like Austria. A track like Austria is. It's a little similar to Hungary, only I think Austria's probably got like more higher speed corners than Hungary does. But I think, like I was saying with Mercedes, I think they have the most consistent package right now, where Aston Martin, tight, twisty tracks, that kind of favors them. So I think those are going to be the two teams that'll, I guess, when we remove Red Bull.
Yeah. You can't, what are we going to say? Like, well, they won again. Like, that's great.
Max is going to win by 17 seconds.
It was interesting. Like, Max, when we were in the post-race press conference, like, Max said to us, like, Austria would be interesting because he felt that, some of the teams were starting to claw into their performance advantage. And it does look like they have. Like, the teams are getting closer in race pace. Max only had like an 8-9 second lead during the race at the British Grand Prix. But he did make mention that he thought Hungary was going to be interesting. And like, I've never actually, like, this season, I haven't heard him say like, hey, when we get to the next race, it'll be interesting. So that's got me curious. That kind of reminds me kind of like Monaco vibes, where, Q3 Verstappen's like digging into the bag of tricks to try and like pull out a 1/10 of a second to beat Alonso for pole.
Yeah,
That's
that
what it
final
reminds me of.
sector, like that final sector is going to go down as one of
That's
the best
legendary.
moments of the season.
Oh,
That was
legendary.
crazy.
Like
Legendary. That guy-
unbelievable.
The guy's unbelievable. I know, Adam, we all got to run here, but I just want to let everybody know, if they head over to our Instagram account, SDPN Tim Hauraney, we are giving away gold grandstand tickets for this weekend's Honda Indy Toronto. The giveaway is courtesy of our friends at Honda Canada. And outside of that, if you're listening to this later, basically the giveaway, we're going to announce the winner Wednesday evening. So yeah, could be tough. Guys, thanks
Get
very
on
much.
it.
Yeah, guys, thanks very much for doing this. Really appreciate it.
And I know you got some crazy things planned for the Indy, so you should get some sleep, man, because it is going to be a wild couple weeks for you.
Yeah, it's already been a wild couple weeks.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. You've been listening to Nailing the Apex. Please head over to Spotify, give us a 5-star rating and a follow. Same goes with Apple Podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube as well. You can follow me on social media at Tim Hauraney. We're going to have Simon Pagenaud on the show on Wednesday. I did say he was going to be on today, but this emergency pod has pushed him to Wednesday. So Simon Pagenaud will be out on Nailing the Apex to preview the Toronto Indy on Wednesday. Thanks again, everyone, for watching and listening.